Okay, I will just go ahead and continue after that rather exciting intermission and break. And I was just getting to the punchline, so stay tuned. Okay. Let me just as a quick recap. So the question is, as far as water security, what's going to happen to our water supplies given climate change and the impacts in the Hindu Kush Himalayas, especially on the glaciers and snow? And if we pay attention to that last slide, it says the blue are the glaciers, right? Those are the glaciers, 56,000 glaciers, enough water to irrigate the world about 2 times over in those glacier resources, but melting rather quickly, except in the Karakoram region where we have this, what we call Karakoram anomaly. So, if we're looking in the future, what happens in the Indus region? We get about 20% of the flow of the Indus River and associated rivers is from snow and ice. If we move to the west, say to the Brahmaputra, then say about less than 10% is from snow and ice resources, so less vulnerable to these changes. What we know, what our modeling tells us is in the short run, say about 10 to 30 years, there'll be an increase in snow in the rivers because of increased glacial melt. After that, the level from glacier melt goes down. However, because of rainfall, increasing rainfall in this region as predicted by the global models, that compensates for that less flow from glaciers and snow. So the end result is in the long term, while there's variability, probably not a huge impact on water resources. So that's relatively some good news to hear. However, the variability is still high. So we see lots of intense rainfall events followed by droughts. So what we can expect is that we have to get better prepared for floods and droughts in this region. And many of the floods cross borders, cross different countries, which plays an important role. And but we do have other kinds of questions. This region is also the place where we see a huge growth in hydropower. Okay, many hydropower plants going up in each and every country in these mountain regions. Relatively clean energy potential. One question, is it safe, right? Given the landslides, given those gloughs, given the floods in the region, is that safe? I think what we have to do is switch our conventional thinking about hydropower development and really take these climate change impacts when we're moving forward and designing the hydropower. And really design these as also part of a flood mitigation strategy. So I think we have to switch what we're doing in hydropower development to make it more environmentally, more aware of these climate change impacts. Now if we think about the last few years, right, we had Uttarakhand floods, we had last year floods in Srinagar, Kashmir, Nepal floods, and we had an avalanche along Mount Everest that unfortunately killed a lot of Sherpa people. We had this snowstorm, freak snowstorm, also in the mountains where a lot of trekkers were unfortunately killed. So I had a CNN reporter ask, right, was that due to climate change? Was that due to climate? Unfortunately, I could not say any of those events was due to climate change, right? I can't really pinpoint that an avalanche happened because of climate change, right? Or a snowfall happened. That happens all the time in the mountains. However, what I can say safely is that the risk of these extreme events is going to increase. So we see now more people living in floodplains. We see more road built. We see more trekkers in the mountains. We see more people trying to climb Mount Everest. So in a way, yes, getting in the way of nature, but that risk will increase in the future with climate change. So what can we do? finally, this is my final point. I think one is just what Dr. Pachauri was saying, what IPCC is saying. I think for us, taking this message about impacts in mountain to the global community is important to mitigate the greenhouse gases. But I think for India, what it is really much better preparedness, especially for extreme events, for the floods and droughts. And for the floods, it really means preparing end-to-end systems to combat this, right? It's better design of our infrastructure. It's better early warning systems, better response to the flood event. So really a lot of attention paid into the flood event. So a lot of that is really at a community level. So we can work a lot with communities on community-based flood potential. I think we have to look at new designs and really rethink hydropower will happen, but how do we make that happen in a better way? We need a lot more science on what's happening to the glaciers and snow. A lot of uncertainty remains, especially about precipitation and snow, as well as the glaciers. Let's recognize that a lot of these rivers cross borders, right? Some of them start in China, right, and flow through Nepal to India to Bangladesh. A lot of these, and so I believe a lot more cooperation will help us to move forward in this area. And my final request is thinking of mountain people, right? They're the custodians, they're the caretakers of this resource. Few of them, probably less marginalized political voice. Let's help them out as we're trying to adapt to all these climate change impacts. Please share the benefits of hydropower, of all the resources we use from the mountains, and make sure those resources get back to mountain people. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for all of your attention 2 times for this speech, but I did very much enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation and for your message. The speakers are requested to kindly wrap up their talk in 7 to 8 minutes so that we have more time left for the interactions and the discussion with the audience. Now I'd request Mr. Jeremy Bird, Director General, International Water Management Institute, Sri Lanka, to take over. Mr. Jeremy Bird specializes in water resources policy, law, management, and institutions. His career includes 3 years as CEO of the Mekong River Commission. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and Dr. Gupta and distinguished delegates, colleagues, it's a great pleasure to be here. I'd actually want to carry on a little bit from what David just said and just say that variability is already with us, and the sorts of things that we need to do about it are no-regret solutions. We have extremes. You can see this is a picture from the Mekong River, one of the rivers that emanates from those water towers that David was talking about. And you can see the interannual variation, both in terms of dry season and wet season. And the prolonged floods and drought situations that we get are already a reality. And so whatever we do now to address that is a no-regret solution to also addressing the fact that these are going to intensify in the future with greater climate change. We've heard from Dr. Pachauri about some of the impacts, but the point I want to make here is that many of these impacts are going to affect the poorest people most, the people who don't have the financial resources to be able to adapt to it and to cope with it. So I think this is something we also need to bear in mind when we're looking at targeting our interventions to respond to that. This is some work, if you look at all those IPCC models and the projections that we know there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. But this is work that one of our other organizations we're associated with, the Wheaton Maize Institute, has done, looking at the possibilities. What's the projections for wheat in India, and particularly northern India in the wheat belt? And you can see here the blue area is the high potential areas for wheat, which is reducing under a climate change scenarios. And the yellow areas, the areas which are already under heat stress, are going to get even more heat stressed and make it difficult to produce wheat in the future. So I think we need to take those models and then see what that's going to mean in practice. And then work we did in a similar vein in Sri Lanka was saying, okay, well, let's look at what the exposure index are for people. But let's also look at the sensitivity of those people, the communities, the livelihoods, the way they make their livings to those climate changes. And then what are the abilities, the coping capacities of those people to be able to adapt to that, and then come up with a composite sort of vulnerability index to climate change. And this work then has actually, you can see how the three different aspects, the exposure index, the sensitivity index, and the adaptive capacity index, then can come together to then help governments to target the interventions in particular areas to those that are most likely to be affected. So I only have a few more, 5 or 6 minutes, so let's look at a few solutions. I think we really are trying to focus here on what can we do about this. And first of all, storage. Water storage provides a great buffer, to great resilience to climate change variability. We know that. But storage doesn't just equate to large dams. There's storage in many different forms. There's storage underground in aquifers, shallow and deep. There's storage from small ponds to large reservoirs, in soil moisture through water harvesting techniques, rooftop collection and tanks, etc., and in natural wetlands. So what sort of institutional form do we need to be able to examine what the different options are for water storage, rather than just going straight for the large infrastructure options? So I think this is a challenge for many governments and many institutions also, as Bindu said, to ensure that this type of dialogue on the most appropriate responses gets a broad reading. And we also look at the interactions, the water, energy, food and environment interactions of those. Here in India, there's a tremendous reliance on groundwater for irrigation. Almost 4 times the amount of irrigation comes from groundwater here than it does from the public service canal systems. And yet we know at the same time there's tremendous over-abstraction in the Western countries, the North and Western countries, and less abstraction, but still great potential in the Eastern Gangetic Plains. So climate change is going to affect the recharge of those aquifers in adverse ways. You know, with more intense storms, you'll get more runoff and less infiltration into the groundwater, for example. So one of the solutions we're looking at is how can we assist that recharge through managed aquifer recharge, something that I think is already happening in many countries by allowing space for greater ponding of water to be fed into aquifers, for recharge wells to be built, etc. And you can see there the difference between the left and the right figures there in terms of a system without managed aquifer recharge and with recharge. And this comes back to the question that's been challenging many institutions already, is how do you get this conjunctive use of surface and groundwater irrigation to be more effective, to be more equitable, to be more fair, and to be more resilient, recognizing that the fluctuations of levels in groundwater is much less than the fluctuations in surface water, and therefore there is this additional benefit you can get from managing the groundwater better. And this is already happening in India. The Central Groundwater Board has already started a program of trying to recharge about 36 billion cubic meters into the groundwaters in western and southern India. And we're also looking at, from a research perspective, what would need to happen, both in terms of the physical interventions, but also the institutional interventions and the cross-sector linkages to be able to achieve this. So in fact, in the Eastern Gangetic Plains, for example, to be able to say, well, we can use more water in the dry season. We can overdraft some of the groundwater and allow more space for the annual replenishment from the floods, from the Ganges floods, to replenish that groundwater back to normal levels again. So get a win-win solution there in terms of taking off the peak of the floods, but also through groundwater recharge, but also then using that water for more irrigation. The third one I want to look at is solar pumps. The government of India, I think there's already about 20,000 solar pumps here have taken off for irrigation. And there are subsidy regimes being put in place. This compares to the about 11 million electric pumps and about 6 or 7 million diesel pumps. So there's a tremendous scope there to replace those fossil fuel generated irrigation pumps with solar fuel. So I think this is a great new opportunity for the irrigation mission here in India. At the same time, it comes with a risk. If you have effectively free electricity generating your pumps, then you risk overdrafting the groundwater even more than it is at the moment. So what type of subsidy regime could you put in place to be able to again, safeguard against that. And work that my colleague who's in the audience here, Dr. Tushar Shah, from the IMI Tata program has been working on, is to look at the opportunities for a solar cash crop. If you have excess solar power from your irrigation pump, why not feed that back into the grid system and then actually use it as a solar cash crop with a guaranteed feed-in tariff? One of the problems, though, with that is you don't have the connectivity. So it does need a capital cost, in many places anyway, you need a capital cost injection into that connectivity. But it's already happening in Karnataka with the Surya Rayata program, and I think we need to learn lessons from that. And these are some of the solutions, either direct linkage into the grid from individual farmers or setting up collective mechanisms, cooperatives, where groups can then be selling their power collectively into the grid, and it reduces the amount of transaction costs for the utility, something they're quite concerned about. The fourth one is waste. We heard this morning also from the Minister that we need to look at how to use waste. Waste is a tremendous asset, but it also comes with various cultural concerns. So we've been looking at both wastewater and solid waste management to bring it back safely and healthily back into agriculture through some natural processes for retention to reduce pathogen transmission into vegetables in particular, and particularly in this vastly growing peri-urban area, which is expanding so quickly here in India. Again, a tremendous opportunity. And then big data. Now, big data, remote sensing, Earth observations, etc., is providing us with tremendous opportunities. In the United States, they already have now for several years a drought monitor index, which is allowing farmers to take better decisions about the sorts of cropping patterns, irrigation regimes they'd be looking at for their crops. And we're developing something similar now for South Asia. So hopefully soon there will be this available drought monitoring index on the web, which people can refer to for governments to help in planning, to start to influence their advice on the sorts of duration of crops that farmers should be using, the seed availability for those crops, etc., as you go through a drought situation. And also for floods. For the first time, we're able in almost real time to analyze tremendous amounts of data. This graphic, which is rolling through at the moment, is showing you for 2010, every 8 days, the extent of flooding over a 250-meter square across the whole of South Asia. This can now be analyzed in a matter of hours and generated. So it provides, again, better information for insurance companies, for flood insurance, for governments in terms of planning of at-risk areas and things like this. And I think also then, of course, in terms of response mechanisms, in terms of targeting relief and response activities after a major flood event. So I think big data also has a tremendous opportunity here. And finally, I just want to look at the whole issue of climate smart villages. This is being promoted by, again, one of our sister programs, the Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security program of the CGIAR. And it's trying again to integrate different aspects within the same community, requiring, of course, great institutional cooperation, which is the real challenge. And as Asid said in his introduction this morning, it's not that we have a water crisis, really, it's that we have a management crisis. And I think this is something which is trying to overcome that. You're saying where you actually look within a village to try and see whether those can be more weather smart, more water smart, more carbon and nitrogen smart, energy smart, and knowledge smart. So I think this is something we also subscribe to that same view, that there are tremendous opportunities, but they will require a rethink in terms of the way we organize ourselves across the institutions, that we conduct dialogues and planning processes, and the knowledge and awareness that we need to be able to get a groundswell of support and opinion for these. And particularly in terms of the carrots, as Tushar would tell you, how do we design the subsidy regimes to really take advantage of some of these tremendous opportunities like solar irrigation pumping, but without providing the sorts of adverse impacts that you would get on other sectors like water and groundwater in particular. So these are some of the websites where you can find more information. I'm look forward to taking some questions later. And we also have a brochure on tackling climate change, which I have a few copies for those that are interested. So thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for discussing the solutions to combat these problems. This brings us to the end of the first panel discussion, and we would continue with the second panel discussion. And I would request Mr. Jope Kramwinkel, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Geneva, Switzerland, to take over. This discussion would be moderated by Professor Asit Kumar Biswas.
Good morning. Let me just check. 7 minutes we were being given, and in good business terms, within my colleagues from the business session, we're trying to trade minutes, so to see whether we can optimize our presentation. What I would like to do is, in the 7 minutes we've been given, to give you a flavor of how the business community over the last decades have moved from seeing water as an issue which was, of course, important for the business in terms of its operations, to a very strategic issue in how we see the future. So that's a big task in 7 minutes, but Asit promised me that you later can read a little bit more about it. Let me just say a little bit about us. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development brings together some 200 major multinationals and at least 5 multinationals from Indian origin. I'm a member of our organization, and they have sustainability in the heart of their business strategy. So what I'd like to bring you back to 2007, actually to 2003. It was the Kyoto World Water Forum, where the first time the business community had a whole day talking about water. It was a disaster. It was a disaster because the debate went about privatization of water, and the debate went about philanthropy. The debate wasn't about water being a strategic issue for the business. So in the business community, a small group of companies came together, and they worked on scenarios, business in the world of water, actually trying to think about what water means for the business community in the future, and actually in doing so, raising the awareness in the business community. We came up with 3 scenarios, basically talking about the role of water in a different context. And as you can see from this slide, it is then already recognized that there is a role for business in terms of innovation, there is a role for business in the social aspects of water, and there is a role of business in being part of driving the solutions. That was 2007, so that's where we raised the bar in terms of awareness among the companies. So what did we do? Because one thing is you raise the awareness, and then the company said, hey, so what? Now we are aware, what can we do? And that is the road to what we call the water stewardship road. In first instance, we developed tools, and I'm happy to share something later about it, about the Indian water tool, which allowed companies to assess where are their water risks. That's based on global water data, and we worked on the global water tool. Then we asked ourselves the question, all right, now how can you, if you are aware where your risks are, how can we drive the plans? And then we developed some additional tools which allowed companies to value water better, and actually based on the valuation of the water which they were actually using, and they will make better decisions. And ultimately, we say, all right, finally, the decisions about water management in companies is in watersheds, and you have to share that with the others who are using the watershed. So you actually move from a rather inward-looking first step, awareness, to an outward-looking step, which is all about collaboration and finding joint solutions. Now, I have to say, not all companies are at the same level in this shape. I mean, there's still a lot of companies who are still identifying their risks, and there are companies, and I'm happy to say the companies who follow me will actually on the leadership side of things, who actually moved already outside the fence and actually trying to find solutions which co-optimize among the various users of the rivershed. In the World Business Council, we asked ourselves, is this good enough? Are we actually we see these challenges, and would like to refer back to the previous speakers to say how important water is and the risks are there. So we said ourselves, is talking good enough? No, we have to change the talking into action. It is all about action. What can we do today to shift the sort of potential future where we all drive into the wrong direction to something which is more towards a sustainable path? And I'll come back to what Asit said a little bit about, is there enough water or isn't there enough water, which is part of that. So we developed a platform which is called Action 2020, basically saying to the business community, what can we do in the next 8 years now, or for the 6 years, to actually change this pattern which we see in front of us, which if we do continuously doing what we're doing today is driving us to the wrong direction. We actually developed 9 areas of action, and I only show you to say that I'm very proud that water is bang in the middle. And that's not because of, it's a little bit by luck, but also because water connects to all the other solutions. You know, we talked this morning about energy, we talked about mining, we talked about social impact, but water actually relates to all of these issues. So water is extremely difficult to manage, already seeing it as a resource on its own, but then you also have to start to manage it as part and parcel of the other issues you want to manage. I come back to the issue is why is it important to do this? And we did some calculations, and Asit, I disagree with you. It is important to tell the world that if we are doing what we are doing today, there isn't enough water for everything what we do. I do agree with you that there are solutions which actually can address this gap. But, you know, it may be, you know, very simple, and this is one of these calculations you can make also on the back of the envelope, is that if we continue to do what we do today with the way we manage water, in the way we use water for energy, in the way we use water for agriculture purposes, in the way we use water for the industry, then there isn't enough water for everything what we want to do. So we have to do something. So it is really a call for action, and we call this scale up. There are solutions. You know, there's plenty of solutions out there, people working on being more efficient, and I'm happy to say a few of the solutions are already being presented. But what we desperately need is to scale these up, the solutions, so that we can have the impact. So we call that scale up. So yes, there are areas where we want to focus on, but we need to drive the scale up. We need to drive the collective way, and that's where government, policy, and makers, and industry in this case, have to work together to actually make sure that we can bring those solutions which we have been talking about to mainstream so that they drive impact. Now, sorry, this slide I can talk about for hours because this is our work program. So what does it mean actually to say, right, where do you want to focus on? We want to focus on, sorry? If I can finish in a couple of minutes, yes, this is 2 minutes. So I leave the important bit for you to think about. What we want, more money from the business to flow in natural infrastructure. Natural infrastructure is keen for water management. We want to see that work. We want to see spinning the water cycle. We want to see more businesses actually working together so that the water which is being used by the companies is being reused several more times. We want to see more active involvement of business in delivering of access to water and sanitation. We want to see and actually that's been said a few times, that there is a lot of issues about climate change. We want better tools for business to deal actually with climate change, and ultimately, you know, you will be, Jeremy, happy to say is we want to see a much more water efficient agriculture where our business community can help. I'm been told to stop, and I'm very happy to stop because I'm going to take plenty of questions hopefully afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I'd request Mr. Sanjay Khajuria, Senior Vice President from Nestle, to take over. And we'd gently remind all the speakers to wrap up the talks in 7 to 8 minutes, please, as we are running late.
Good afternoon, Professor Biswas, Dr. Gupta. Thank you very much for inviting, and I think it's a great experience to be here. I planned this presentation for 20 minutes, so I don't know how I'm going to make it in 7, but let's give it a shot. I'm sure many of you know about Nestle. We are the leading nutrition, health, and wellness company. We are in India for over 100 years now, and our turnover last year was over 9,000 crores. We believe in creating shared value. We believe that whatever we are doing should be good for the society and for the shareholders together. And one of the prerequisites for creating shared value is that whatever we do in terms of our products, in terms of our brands and our processes, there should be sustainable and sustainability in all the efforts which we do. Why we are so concerned about this? The United Nations projects that in 40 years or so, we are talking about 9 billion people. The food production needs to be more than double. There are lifestyle changes, there are diet changes, and the sheer number is going to change. We are already in a situation where this is getting, the usage is more than what we can replenish. At the same time, 1/3 of the food is wasted, and that's where the big concern comes in. Just to give you a number, we waste close to 1 billion tons of food every year. If I were to take India numbers, we waste product worth about 40,000 crores in a year. These numbers are humongous. Food sector impacted by climate change. I won't get into this. Dr. Pachori explained it in great detail. Where should the focus be? Food processing industry has to focus on few things. The water stress, as many of the speakers before have mentioned. Greenhouse gas emissions, 78% comes from fossil fuel, but there is a reasonable number which also comes from agriculture. We need to be more resilient, be it in terms of being resilient in farms, where we need to provide more information and knowledge to farmers in terms of water conservation, how to use biogas and things. And definitely, some of the speakers before mentioned about adaptation. I think we have to start look at varieties which are less prone to things like droughts and hot temperatures. We also need to look at whether we can change the planting time. Punjab government has already taken an initiative that before 10th of June, they don't allow any paddy production. So what does Nestle really do? We have picked up on all these focus areas, and we talk about preservation, natural resources efficiency, biodiversity conservation, air emission reduction, climate change adaptation, and zero waste. I'll take a few minutes to take you through each of these focus areas and what we are doing. Water, you all know the challenge. So what we are really doing is we are working a lot with the communities. We are putting clean drinking water fountains around our factories and village schools. Basically, we take water from about 150 feet below so that the water is cleaner than what is available at the ground level. As things stand now, we are actually catering to over 80,000 students. We are also working on making sanitation facilities for girl students, which is one of the highest reason why girl students drop out. We create water awareness programs specifically for various categories. We have a program for farmers. We have been doing this program for many years, but in 2013, we joined hands with the Government of Punjab, Department of Agriculture, and given information and knowledge to about 25,000 farmers on paddy cultivation and how to save water there. I'm very pleased to see here some of our partners. We work a lot with IVMI. In fact, IVMI did an interesting study for us where we looked at the water table and which all crops use maximum water. Not a surprise, sir, but your organization found out that if there is a wheat and a milk combination, it is best for water compared to paddy. We have taken this to various government authorities. We are working with the farmers on this. We work a lot with trade association. Mr. Brabeck, our chairman, a little while back mentioned about Water Resources Group. Happy to inform you that the work on this is already on in Karnataka, and we are going to move into other states as well. In our factories, we take a lot of water initiative. The latest being that we have started extracting water from the milk which we get. Most of you would know that milk in any case contains about 80 to 89% water, and we are able to extract that water from the milk. Because of all these initiatives which were taken, you will see that in last 15 years or so, we have saved 71% water per ton of the product which we manufacture, and we have also reduced other waste generations there. On natural resources efficiency, various activities are being undertaken. All the plastic waste and the waste from our factories sent to ACC, which is a cement factory. We have also started working now with the NGOs around our factories in Himachal, where these NGOs will collect the plastic and the waste, bring it to our factory, and we will convert it into fuel through a gasolyzer. We take various initiatives like using green tea waste into manufacturing of products like coffee. We are putting in solar panel in all our milk agencies in Punjab. We have touched about 900 plus by now. And more we are encouraging biogas by farmers. And if you see, because of all these efforts, the reduction in energy consumption in our factories is gone down by about 60%. Biodiversity conservation, a lot of work which is being done for coffee farmers and dairy extension. We are, again and again, we are reiterating with the farmers the value of using less fertilizer or the optimal fertilizer and using the water conservation method. We are adopting water harvesting method with the farmers. We are reducing use of non-renewable energy, and I gave you a few examples earlier. We are making effort to bring crops through the government of India which are disease resistant, especially in the coffee area. In Punjab, we are helping farmers make silage making. In 2010, we committed that we will not go for any forestation. All our products will actually are committing to no deforestation. We have partnership with global non-profit organizations, particularly Forest Trust. In 2013, I'm happy to report that 100% of our palm oil was RSPO certified. We are looking at air emission reduction. On one side, we are doing a lot of work at our own factories. We are also making sure that the consumers will also get this information. So if you see our recent packs, especially the milk packs, you will see some of the tips which we are giving the farmers on how to reduce greenhouse emissions. We are asking and training our farmers on climate change adaptation. Professor Biswas has seen some of these activities which we do in dairy farming. We are also doing a lot of work in chicory cultivation, where we are putting in another crop so that the health of the crop, health of the soil doesn't suffer. All our suppliers have to sign off the responsible sourcing, and one of the key elements of responsible sourcing is basically to follow the environmental methodologies. Zero waste is something which we have talked about. In India, as I mentioned, 40,000 crores worth of goods gets wasted. The perishable commodities get wasted. We convert about 1.5 million tons of fruits and vegetable and other perishable commodities into food products. We are also encourage farmers not to waste. We have started putting in the cooling facilities around the milk farmers so that there is no waste of milk between the farm and our factories. Needless to say, all these efforts are being seen by the external organizations. So on the CDP climate change, we are very high. On Dow Jones Sustainability, we are at 80% figure, which is roughly double the industry average. Oxfam, which does 10 top food and beverages company, has been continuing to give us the top rating. The work is being done by industry, and I think Professor Biswas mentioned in his speech that industry has to step up and do more work. I would put it differently, Professor Biswas. I think all of us have a role to play. The government has to start setting direction. I think industry has the wherewithal to invest and to innovate, and the NGOs and the communities have to really step up and start to follow what are the best practices today. Thank you very much. I hope I managed the time.
Thank you, sir, for sharing the views of Nestle. Our next speaker is Mr. Asim Parekh. He's from Coca-Cola. He's working there as Vice President Technical.
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, and I guess I'm very close between you and the lunch, so I'll try to do a better job now. And thank you, Dr. Biswas, thank you, Dr. Rajiv Gupta, for inviting me to my hometown, and I have taken the liberty of deciding the new business attire out here is this. So with this, I'll start. A little bit about I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, and there is nothing much as a presentation I have. The presentation is only to, explain to you visually what the stories are. It's my personal journey in this company, Coca-Cola India, for the last 15 years. And I believe that the way to look at sustainability is through constructive discontent. Normally, a lot of industries tend to look at in a very incremental mitigation manner, but there is an opportunity for industries to change the paradigm and have a look at sustainability. And let me tell you those 2-3 stories. I'm not going to dwell on this. We know the definitions of sustainability. We also know, right from the more than 12,000 years ago, and since the man arrived on this world, till now, if you look at all those different occupations, they were all there to create wealth. And so even today, when there are challenges on sustainability, I firmly believe that the mankind will live up to this challenge and find the right solutions. But as human beings, our resources requirements has really gone up dramatically. From 2 kgs of resources, we are almost 44 kgs now. So usually the approach of companies is more like pre-compliance and moving to compliance, and some of us get on to beyond compliance, and later on it's an integrated, forms a part of their business strategy. And then the tipping point comes, and it is the purpose and the passion of the whole organization behind sustainability. And I believe that the CEOs can play a very dramatic role, and I'll tell you what my CEO played with me. And he started from the reverse way. He started with a purpose and passion and pushed the whole organization. And I'll tell you those stories right now. Now, it adds on to the top line and the bottom line, and I'll give you instances how it adds on to the top line. On the bottom line, we tend to all agree, because all endeavors on sustainability, it's all about reducing consumption, be it energy or be it resources. Now, this is the framework and with Coca-Cola, and let me tell you, start with the story on water. The water is our, earlier speakers have mentioned, it's 90% of our turnover. And we believe that, and it's our basic raw material. Over a period of time, yes, our bottling system has made a huge progress. We have reduced the consumption by more than 50% from the year 2007. There are 59 bottling plants in India, and all of them have invested upwards of 3 crores to reduce the water consumption, and we believe the journey has just started in India. There is a possibility of going for 1 liter of our final product. Today we are consuming 1.87 liters. I think the opportunity is to go all the way till 1.1, and we are not giving up this challenge. Now, we also believe that water first belongs to the community. We borrow the water from the community to run our operations, and we need to return it back. And this is what my boss told me. The president of the company at that time was Atul Singh. And when he joined the Indian operations around close to 2005 and 6, he said, we need to return all the water we consume back to the community in the form of creating rainwater harvesting potentials. So we did more than 350 plus projects, and these are different kinds of projects, and I'll give you a flavor of them. So these are the projects on check dams, including drip irrigation and laser leveling in Punjab, because all our 59 plants are all in the rural areas, and they tend to consume water. In agriculture, we know it is a very high consumption. And how we can, the laser leveling really reduce the water consumption surrounding our Punjab plants, and thus helping, together with the community, we could sustain the water in the aquifers. So these are the different projects what we have done. Now, I'll tell you this, we have a brand called Maaza, and Maaza consumes mangoes. And as you make a simple equation from demand and supply, we believe that we're going to run short of mangoes the way our business in Maaza is growing. And that will definitely happen in 7 to 8 years' time. And if you have to do something on mangoes, We shouldn't wait for the 7 years, the 7th year to come. We should do it right now. So this is what our mango story. Incidentally, India used to be and still is the largest mango producer in the world, but our yield is only 6 tons an hectare, which is even lower to the mango's productivity in Bangladesh and Pakistan. So we saw that's a business opportunity. And we worked with Jain Irrigation and developed this concept of ultra-high density plantation. What it means is typically we plant 4 mango trees at a gap of more than 40 feet or 10 meters. But here you actually plant mango trees like a crop farming. You keep it very close to each other. Obviously, we don't allow the trees to grow more than 7 to 8 feet. And there was another benefit out of it is you can actually pluck the mangoes by hand, so the wastages in the form of the fruit falling off doesn't happen, but the other benefits are very interesting. Just look at the water usage per ton. It actually comes down to by 50%. So water is also there in the agricultural source, and that's where also we would like to work on it. And this has made, we have committed to more than $10 million in the Chittor district to propagate ultra-high density plantation. This is the proof of the concept. Today, more than close to around 550 hectares, we have created the demonstration farms out there. On energy, and here I would take you, and internally, my boss said we need to plan for, he just came one day and said, let's have 50% of our total energy consumption from renewable sources. Today, I'm happy to report more than 25 to 30%. It is already on renewable basis, and you can see the boiler out there. This boiler, we used to use furnace oil that has been knocked out completely, in almost all our 59 plants. And we are on our journey to 50% renewal. This is an interesting story about, our business has to survive on cooling the product. And we use a lot of coolers, and you would have seen the coolers all across the markets. We had moved many years ago from CFC to HFC. But here we took a call that we need to go even lower by changing the refrigerant from CFC to carbon dioxide. While we were developing the technology and how we went about doing it, we accidentally came across it is actually 9 to 12% energy efficient. So it now creates a preference for our retail partners to go for CO2 coolers so as to reduce the electricity bill. And this is the last story. I will take just 1 minute. All bosses are bosses. And this has happened one day. My boss came back from the heartland of Uttar Pradesh in the peak summer, and he found that there is no chilled Coca-Cola available. So he says, you need to arrange it. A typical response would have been, let's go and buy, place some chest coolers or organize for some ice blocks. But we decided, let's not do that way. So we developed a solar cooler. This solar cooler works on DC current. We changed the configuration from AC to DC. And after a month, I went there to check on how is the cooler doing, and I was very proud of the fact that me and my team really cracked it. And she tells me that, "Kis gadhe ne cooler banaya hai?" I said, "Which idiot developed this cooler?" I said, "Ma'am, what happened?" Yes, it chills the product, but in the evening when there is no sunlight, what do I do? So we said, okay, we can organize a small solar lantern and we can just attach with it. It generates enough of electricity. And I went once again after a month later and said, "Ma'am, I was very grinning and very, very confident by now she should be happy." She said, "Still, aapne kuch dimag nahi lagaya." And she actually challenged me as an engineer. I said, "Why? What happened? How do I charge my mobile phone? I go another 4 kilometers away to charge my mobile phone." So we said, okay, you must have seen in those traffic signals, somebody is selling a charger, a universal charger, which is costing hardly $2. We picked it up, fitted it, and now what's the scenario? The shop is open in the evening. Hers is the only shop which is open. There is a light out there. A Coke is available chilled. And there are people sitting out there to charge their mobile phones as well. And while they are sitting there, they're having our products and also buying something more. So she had more footfalls. I mean, this was a revolution out there. It increased our top line. We have more than 2,000 of these coolers in the market, and suddenly, in those heartlands of UP and many other states where electricity is a challenge, the business is booming out there. So, these retailers taught me quite a few things. So this is just a summary of different things we have done. And I would conclude saying that if we have to predict a future, let's work towards it and create it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing those interesting stories with us. The last speaker for our second panel discussion is Mr. Madan Sippy. I would cordially invite him to take the stage. He is the CEO of Grundfos. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Water stress is one thing, but surely conference arrangement stress for Professor Biswas and managing time is another one, I'm sure, which is high in the mind. But I will do my best. I had planned this to be 5 minutes, and since a lot of really wise things have already been said today, I can probably do it in 4. So I will do it. I will finance a little bit of time, I'm pretty sure. Many of you may not know Grundfos. Grundfos is a company I'm happy and proud to represent, both because we are the world's largest producer of pumps. We make 16 million pumps every year, all the way from small heat circulator pumps to flood control pumps that can move several cubic meters of water per second. And we are a 70-year-old family and foundation-owned company whose primary purpose is to set new technological standards that can improve quality of life for people and substantially improve world sustainability. And this is something the third generation of the owner family, which is still very active, is keen about, and that is why we are around, not just to make money or profits. I'm happy and privileged to be here around a lot of thought leaders, visionary companies like Coca-Cola and Nestle and policymakers alike, who really have the courage to set this super important topic of water on the agenda. And I'd like to compliment the government, both the local government but also the central government, for really making water such a central theme of what is being done this week. If I think about the policy aspect of water, I have to say that neither do I think companies should be policymakers, nor would they probably be pretty good at it, but at least an opinion from our side and an input to the policymakers would be to ensure and agree with the people who say that unless resources have a price, it would be literally impossible to manage the behaviors with people. So this fundamental behavior change that has to happen has to come from a pricing and incentive system which can both give a carrot, but it also has to carry a stick. And we also happen to believe that if that pricing system is a progressive one, it can be done intelligently without a social bias towards those who can least afford it. But I won't speak more about that policy making because I think that is better left in other people's hands, even though I think it is an obligation of companies to try in the best way to affect policy making in areas which they know of specifically. What I will talk about is also a topic that has been talked about a little bit earlier today by quite a few speakers, namely the water energy nexus. Also, there's a water energy food nexus, but water energy nexus is an absolutely critical one because, as has been said, there's a huge amount of water being included in producing energy and a huge amount of energy being consumed to both produce water and transport water. And if you didn't know it, which was actually a surprise to me until relatively recently, more than 10% of total world electricity consumption is from electrical pumps. And if you consider that if all those pumps today were exchanged with the latest available technology, that could be more than halved. So by exchanging only pumps to the latest technological standard, more than 5% of total world electricity consumption could go away. And there are many very tangible examples. We as a private company very much believe in tangible examples, and I really enjoyed the stories from Coca-Cola, which were very lively stories as well. And one of the stories ties exactly into what the example that was also mentioned, namely solar-powered pumps. Because you may say solar-powered pumps give a lot of wonderful things to a village that really needs the water. But the other thing is what it does to the village is it doesn't only help irrigation, it doesn't only give a constant and reliable water supply, it doesn't only in a sustainable way leverage a source which this fine country is blessed with, namely the sun. What it also does is that the women, the children, the workers who would otherwise in many cases hand pump the water day in and day out, they can now get education, they can be more productive in the farming work and so on. So therefore it starts a virtuous cycle of an entire society who can create more value and move on and become more and more educated. So this is a wonderful example of something that can actually happen and be something which is almost a self-sustained activity. And we are happy to work as Grundfos with many partners around this fine country to install several of those high-efficient solar-powered pumps. Another example, a lot has been talked about also today about the loss of water, the non-revenue water, where in many cases, not only in India, but also in many EU countries, up towards 50% of all water is simply wasted in the pipelines. And again, here I'll just point to the fact that technologies exist to do that, to reduce that. There is such a thing as as a sensor-driven pump pressure system. So instead of just having a pump that continues with very high pressure in a water system, in a pipeline of waters, if you intelligently measure what is the need for water at any given time through a sensor system and feed that back to the pumps of how much pressure they would use, that would actually mean that we could reduce substantially the water loss because the pressure which would push water out through the leaks in the system would go down. And by the way, the pump would use substantially less electricity. So again, I think the main message from our side is that not all, but most of all the technological solutions that are here today are some that can address this water energy nexus, which has to be addressed in synchronization and not in two isolated problems, potentially even in two isolated ministries. And to sum up my 4 minutes, what I will do is just to say our opinion about what is the role of private companies. Well, first and foremost, we believe that private companies should take their own medicine. We cannot say that we want to do good to the world unless we also pave the way like companies like Nestle and Coca-Cola, who actually act more sustainably than they do before and set very ambitious targets for both their energy consumption and water consumption. Grundfos, as an example, have set an ambition to never in the company lifetime use more CO2 than we did in 2008, no matter how much we grow. And that's a wildly ambitious target, and similarly for water. The other thing is, as was also said earlier today, our research and development budgets are more often much higher than any budget or national research institutions. So we have the obligation as private companies to come up with technological solutions that can pave the way for the solutions that are needed. And I think we have a huge potential to leverage that even further. And finally, the obligation we have is to engage in partnerships, because no company can do many things alone. Some companies can work together, which we see very often, but also if there are public-private partnerships where policymakers, local authorities, NGOs and private companies work together, we believe that mountains can be used, which again the solar-powered pumps in Indian villages from our side is one small example of. So I'll finish up again by thanking the Rangers for this fine event, and we are at least very happy from our side to work even more intensely, both in India and other places in the world, to address these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for bringing across your views.